Thank you so much, Tanmay. I think the whole point of that presentation was to give you a bird's eye view of what the ecosystem looks like and how much we've evolved, not just in terms of volume but also in terms of value that is being driven from these GCCs. And while we gave you that bird's eye view, one of the key wins of a session like this is to hear directly from practitioners in the industry in terms of how they have been able to effect change from their GCC for the global and the larger organization. So it's very exciting for me to be here to be chairing this session and have these illustrious panelists that have come on board and agreed to talk with us and actually share their experience of having grown as well as matured the India GCC and this session is really aimed to give you a front row seat to that entire transition to greater value. I'd like to call Avinash from Clean Harbors, Vedha from Providence India, and Simran from ServiceNow. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today for the session. We're so happy to have you here. And let's get straight to it, right? I think for the purpose of the audience, it would be good if you could manually switch your view to a gallery view at this point. That makes it considerably easier to keep track of the session. But let's get started. I think I'll start with Dr. Veda, and sort of invite you into the discussion. A quick brief about how Providence India has evolved as a GCC, maybe take a minute or two, and then tell us specifically what were the triggers, for your transformation and where did it all start, essentially.
Sure. Thanks so much, Namita. I'm glad to be part of this session. I'm Dr. Veda. I lead strategy and operations for Providence India. Physician by background, but switched over to the management side fairly early in my career. And many of you might know, right? Providence India was set up about 3.5 years ago, right? So we're a very, very young GCC. The genesis essentially was healthcare in the US. Again, our parent organization is Providence Health System in the US, which is about $26 billion in size, has about 51 hospitals and a network of 1,000 plus clinics all across the West Coast. And traditionally, healthcare hasn't been very quick to adopt, digital or technology earlier. And as the external environment has been changing, for example, cyber threats have been increasing. There are efficient options available around, moving from on-prem to cloud, and also there has been a wave of consumerization and an efficiency wave thanks to digital technologies that have become available. There was increasing realization within Providence that we need to transform digitally as well to become relevant in the future, right? And also, healthcare in the US has been undergoing a transformation from what we call Health 1.0, which is hospital-centric care, right? So if someone has an illness, they go to a clinic to eventually be referred to a hospital. So everything stops at a hospital. From that Health 1.0 model, the industry has been trying to move to a Health 2.0 model, which is more patient-centric. And so care can be provided where the patient is, or even before that person becomes a patient, right? As a consumer, preventive medicine, informing medicine with genomics, et cetera, right? So that's the transition that the industry has also been undergoing, and Providence wanted to lead the way. And because of that, our leadership essentially realized the importance of having a strong technology muscle within the company, as opposed to relying entirely on vendors, which is traditionally what healthcare companies have been doing, right? So that, and then we realized that we have been behind as an industry, and therefore to play catch up, we would have to accelerate our digital transformation. And then also the specific nature of healthcare is such that all the infrastructure, clinical applications have to be up and running 24/7, right? You cannot have a situation where there is a device that is plugged into a patient and there's a failure. And so for that, it kind of made sense to think of having a setup in India, right? So that we can have a 24/7 coverage in terms of monitoring of applications, etc. And also be able to have a 24/7 development cycle. The other good thing that happened was just with the realization that we need to have an in-house team, our CEO decided to bring on board industry experts from Microsoft, right? And as the CIO, Earlier, before about 4 years ago, we didn't even have a CIO reporting into the CEO, right? So that's one big change that happened. And it was fortunate just for us that the CIO who came on board had a lot of experience working with India, right, for 20 plus years. And that was probably the final lever that kind of helped the board decide that we need to have a setup in India. And so, about 3.5 years ago, we set up a team in India with multiple IT and digital capabilities to drive the digital transformation of Providence. We've grown to about 1,200 today, and in addition to providing services to Providence, which is our parent, we've also brought on board other health systems and have started generating revenue for Providence, which is very relevant in current times, given the situation in the industry. All the P&Ls are under pressure. So I'm going to stop there and see if others want to offer comments or if there are any questions.
Yeah, so I'll invite Simran in at this point, but we will come back to the part, Dr. Veda, where you talked about um, strong technology muscle and this digital and technology transformation being at the core, and how you navigated it for such a traditional enterprise typically, right? So we'll come back to that in terms of how the organization readied for the change. But Simran, want to pull you into the conversation at this point. Same question, I think. What were the specific triggers when ServiceNow decided to run transformation? You come from a completely different sort of industry and domain than Providence. So it'll be interesting to, I think, hear from you at this point.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. It was very interesting to hear Dr. Veda's journey and what Providence was achieving. We're on the IT side, a very different space, much more present and known in India for a long while. Think uh, as we were in the hyper growth phase and continuing to grow in the country, we were at a microcosm where we had the breadth of product portfolios and presence in the organization. We were at a point where we were thinking we could continue to grow organically and continue to innovate and deliver value. But is that what we want? Or what are the factors that can lead us to deliver a much more exponential growth to the organization? And that's when we decided that the best use of the workforce, the breadth of the workforce, presence of portfolios that we have, would be in delivering innovation that would impact more through a better together across different product portfolios. We could do better with introducing leadership and ownership into the site. And those were factors that really made us start to think about what were the factors that can help us increase the impact and value proposition to the bigger company. And from there on, we sort of worked towards a strategy built across the main strengths that we had breadth of product portfolios. Let's be more intentional about strategizing co-located Scrum teams, delivery where we would grow the teams where there was a mismatch between the strengths of different business functions, from engineering to product to design to QE to content, and be more intentional about that.
Got it. Okay.
And our triggers were, that's how we sort of embarked upon what our strategic initiatives would be and lead to the growth.
Sure. Okay, got it. So I think we'll come back to because I've been fortunate enough to go through the ServiceNow journey, and I've had a front row seat, and there are sort of specific triggers where the one thing you called out was the specific intent with which the GCC has scaled, because it was very intentful to say that it will also be with a certain amount of ownership, right, of work. So we'll come back to that a little bit and we'll touch upon that. But Avinash, Clean Harbors, again, completely left of field in terms of the work and the industry that you're operating in. And incidentally, what I just realized is I think all of you have a significant presence in Hyderabad, in India. So I don't know how that kind of converged. But talk us through your journey, Avinash, and what was the specific triggers for Clean Harbors to transform, from here?
Sure. Thank you so much, Namita. And maybe I'll talk 30 seconds about the company Clean Harbors. We are a North America-based environmental services company. 42-year-old, we are mid-size, about $5 billion company. And the GCC is just about 5 years or so old. And we operate out of Hyderabad, Pune, and Bangalore. Hyderabad being the first center, so that's why you see Hyderabad. Uh, Now, talking about how we all got started. Like most companies of our size, most companies in the West in particular, our size and our nature of business, a 42-year-old company used to work with some large consulting firms that have a significant presence in India. But we ourselves never had any presence in India as such. And it all actually started from the fact that, hey, how does this company really leverage this talent? Because companies like businesses like us, it's a very niche business. There are multiple complex businesses, right? Healthcare isn't easy, but BA banking isn't easy. But then there are multiple banking companies that have presence, GCCs, or one way or the other. They have their presence in India. So there is some kind of knowledge that's there in the market. For us, we came in and none of our direct competitors have any presence whatsoever. And so the whole idea was how do we get from a point wherein we are looking at just people with good technical acumen to people who can really understand the business and serve the business. Because ultimately, all the innovation technology that we talk about, it has to lead to business transformation, right? And then that's where it all started. So it was a very small investment. And to be honest with you, the company never realized at that point in time that we are going to scale up this big and the value that we are going to derive out of it. So when I took over, we had about 35, 40 people. Today we are 1,500. And I'm sure in next 1 year or so, we'll add another 1,000 people. So that's how we have been able to transform ourselves. And I would say the levers one has been the executive sponsorship. I think that has been so very critical. And I know I'm sure like Dr. Vedha and Simran, we all come from the industry and we have seen things that work and that don't work. And one of the inputs from the India leadership was that, hey, unless you have executive sponsorship, it's going to be really challenging. So I think we were able to get that right at the beginning. That really was the big plus for us. That was one. Second, I think was there has been a need in the business because like most old economic companies, they have people working there for 15, 20, 25 years doing exactly the same thing. And now they are about to retire. What happens when they retire? And then obviously we need to onboard fresh people, no matter which part of the world, onboard them, train them, and then get them up to speed so that we have a continuity. And the idea was that, hey, if someone in the US or Canada can be onboarded and trained, we have such a huge pool of talent here. So that has been one of our strategies that, take people with some kind of background. We know we'll not get anyone with the exact same experience, bring them on board, have a proper, a rigorous plan to onboard them, train them, bring them up to speed, and grow it from there on. So that has been the other element for us. And the other thought process, which really has helped us right from the beginning. Cost is important. Don't get me wrong. Cost is important, but the focus has not been just cost. The focus has always been on value. And I'll probably give a simple example to oversimplify it. If you are doing a finance shared services, very basic transactional service like accounts payable, something like that. So what metric are you looking at? Are you looking at what is my per seat cost, or are you looking at my per transaction cost? So you look at from a value standpoint. I think that was very clear at the initial stages of our inception. Those were kind of few success factors, I would say, which helped us in our transformation where we are. And finally, we've been kind of bold, doing things which not many companies do, services or kind of offerings which not many companies would venture into. We have gotten into that. I think that has been the other fourth factor I would highlight here, which has allowed us to really unlock the value or the potential from a GCC.
Got it. Very interesting, but I think one sort of specific, maybe double click I'd like to do is, that global buying you talked about, right? And how did you sort of obtain that? You mentioned it, I think, in part where you said, okay, tracking the right metrics helps, for example. But are there any specific like call outs that you have for the audience here today in terms of how you can obtain that global buy-in a little bit faster, a little bit more sustainably from the parent company?
Sure. Ultimately, I can have any great sales pitch, but ultimately we have to deliver. So there was a bit of sales pitch, and my background in sales helped. But ultimately, what we realize is that it was better not to do a big bang. First, hey, here's the concept. This is what we'll do. This is what we will deliver, and have really acute focus on delivering value. And then once you are able to deliver, I think that is when it's much easier to really scale up. So start small, do the best you can. The moment you are successful, latch onto that opportunity to really scale up faster. I think that has been one. Second, in any organization, and I'm sure we all will agree that on one hand, there could be some really, ambassadors for the GCC, and there would be some people not so convinced. So identify those, people at the senior levels right in the beginning. Who could be your evangelists? Who could be your ambassadors? Who would speak about you when you are not in there in the meeting? And then really take good care of them. So prioritize those services or helping them, so that then they speak about you. So you don't speak about yourself, but then that kind of helps in getting the buy-in. I think obviously for delivering, we have to measure, have the right metric, set it up front. And finally, I would say it's also important to be brutally honest. There are things that won't work. We have all seen it no matter what. So if something is not working, raise the flag early and say there's a problem. Because that's, I think, the only way to gain confidence. And so next time when somebody from the GCC says, hey, I'm going to deliver, this is going to work. If there's a problem, I'm going to be the first to raise the flag. I think that kind of helps build that relationship and confidence. So those are kind of few, inputs I can provide in this.
Very useful, Avinash. I think it also kind of, I can see Simran and Dr. Vedha nodding, and I think it kind of resonates in part with them as well, looking for the early wins, tracking the right metrics, being completely transparent and identifying, one exec sponsor or one ambassador for change, right, for the GCC. Simran, to pull you in, anything to add to that, and how did you ready the organization for the change? Because Avinash touched upon it a little bit. He talked about sourcing the right kind of talent, but how did you sort of ready the organization for the change from a people, process, even technology perspective, actually?
We are a technology company, to be honest. I think to start off with, from where Avinash left, wonderful pitch on delivering the value. I think that's the most important. Can't really make a mark without really delivering the value. Right. We had to a good state, and the only thing I'd sort of add there was, as we started doing the site strategy, we were again intentional to ensure that we had a local flavor to the strategy, but it was also aligning to the broader company OKRs, and that helped generate the alignment and sponsorship to the extent that we would want. Right. Now, coming to your other question of the process and going about it, our intention was increasing the impact, right? And we identified levers of innovation, we identified levers of ownership, we identified levers of leadership. Now, as you put these across, your next point is, how do we go about it, right? You've got a talent pool, you're delivering. Now, what do you do to make a bigger impact? First important thing is you'll have to increase the talent pool. You have to increase the talent pool, you need to make your brand presence be felt, right? ServiceNow compared to the other IT companies, not many may know that we are amongst the top 10 cloud providers. We are a SaaS player which has its own platform, which runs on its own data centers, and a variety of products that we run. So we've got functions of cloud governance, we've got functions of platform, we've got functions of product development, and the entire product. So the most important was we need to make the brand presence be felt. We needed to increase our innovation impact. For delivering the innovation impact, the strength that we had was the breadth. The product portfolios, we wanted to encourage people to deliver innovation, which was cutting across the product suites that would impact the sales delivery. We wanted to increase the partner presence or impact the sales pitch through the innovation centers that we had, because we had the talent that was delivering the product, wanted to get them in front of the customers. So we wanted to see what impact we can have to the sales pipeline. And then the last important factor was the talent itself and the growth of the talent, right? I mean, around the leadership side, whether it's technical, whether it is people management, you need to ensure that when you reach that focal point, when you are at the place where you can have the seat on the table, then you need to have the right skills to be able to get to that seat and really stay there. So the last focus was to ensure that we were growing on the leadership side, whether it was on just the tech side, architect, IC roles, which were delivering any values on the engineering side, or whether it was on people management side, we were ensuring different initiatives were there to increase our diversity strength. There were different initiatives for mid management, for senior management. That's how we sort of went about. And I think last point, if I can sort of make sure, was comms. Making sure that whatever initiatives were being done, whatever matrix was being evaluated, was well published to the organization below, to the organization above. We were ensuring that since the initiatives were aligned to company goals, they had an element of the culture reinforcement. And that made us deliver, that made it resonate with the employees as well as with the leadership. I think I'll pause. I've sort of spoken to different factors, and we can hear what Dr. Vedha has to add.
Got it. Very exhaustive list. I think I think there's little to add, and Dr. Veda, anything in your construct that over and above this? I know a lot of this there must be an overlap, but one, and I think there's a question also that sort of come to you is leveraging maybe the larger ecosystem, right, of your customers, your partners, your ultimate sort of users of the technology. Is that possibly one of the additional factors that I'm just actually paraphrasing Maitreya's question, to be fair?
It's wonderful. Yeah. We have the social responsibilities and we have the impacts. So definitely. But Dr. Veda to add.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dr. Veda, anything to add to that in terms of levers for change that helped?
So see, I think a lot of common themes between what Avinash and Simran said and what's true for our organization. A couple of things that I would add is I think we were set up just before COVID hit, right? So we were set up, inaugurated officially in February, and March is when the lockdowns hit us. And we've kind of scaled through that. But in that crisis also, there was an opportunity for us because we were able to, the team that we put together in the early they were able to very quickly deliver a chatbot that could help the health system screen patients for COVID-like symptoms, right? So that was immediate visibility across the system. Similarly, simple things like transition to Microsoft Teams, like O365. It happened around at that time. And so that enabled the health system to work seamlessly remotely, right? And that was a huge, for a very traditional 170-year-old health system. So I think those kind of quick wins were useful. The teams, because we set up 24/7, half in India, half in the US, for the first time in a very long time, the cybersecurity and infrastructure monitoring teams were able to take time off during Christmas, right? And that made a huge difference to them. Workforce crisis and burnout are big themes across the globe, but especially in the US in healthcare right now, right? So what we did kind of had an immediate impact on business and on the team of caregivers. We call employees caregivers, right? So that I think made a big impact and helped our cause. The other thing was being involved in all of the key strategic initiatives for the company, right? We had just embarked on a very large multi-year digital transformation program, and we were part of each element of that digital transformation. So whether it's infrastructure or data or cloud or cybersecurity, etc. Right. So there was a significant presence in India that was driving those kind of programs, and India was one of the strategic initiatives for the CIO. Right. So it was visible at that level. It had sort of board recognition. The other thing that kind of helped us was again comms, but also sending out communications on what the delivery looks like, but also presenting in various internal forums, which kind of spread the word and build more credibility for the India team. So that's essentially what I would say was important. Finally, I think sort of building the culture here, which mirrors what we have in the US. It was a little difficult to pull that off because that's a traditional healthcare setup. Here we have a bunch of folks from the tech industry, right, and much younger workforce as well. But one common theme for the two teams is the mission focus. Or so Providence is a not-for-profit health system, and community service is a core part of what they do in addition to providing healthcare, right? So we've built a similar culture here, which puts employees first and also has a focus on community service. So it was easier for people who traveled here to relate to what we've built here and saw this as one of their offices. So these are some of the factors that I would say were helpful to us.
Got a very interesting call out, I think, on sort of evangelizing that employee centric and employee first sort of culture, because I think Simran talked about evangelizing culture and sort of institutionalizing it, but that it just added, I think, in terms of as a mission statement, knowing what you stand for. So that's a great call out. I think at this point maybe we do have a fair number of questions that have come in, and let's just maybe take a couple of them. I think the first one was while you were talking, Dr. Veda, from Pradeep, who says, what are your recommendations for young GCCs looking to build that tech muscle when their competition for talent is with established organizations? I know being a mission-focused, employee-centric, you just call that out, but is there anything else, especially when you're new in the ecosystem and typically a traditional enterprise, you're not at the cutting edge of like the GAFAM organizations from a brand perspective. So yeah.
See, I think what worked for us was, one, we were healthcare. We were probably the first GCC in the healthcare industry to be set up in India, right? So the reason, for example, I joined the company was this was a beginning of an industry for me, right? And we kind of make sure we speak about that broadly. The ability to make an impact, that this is a purpose-driven organization. Whatever you do sitting in front of your laptop here in India will ultimately have an impact on patients being served on the other side of the world, right? So I think that purpose was also an important theme in how we sort of shared the opportunities in Providence with the talent pool here in the market. So and then of course, because you're part of something new, right, the ability to create an impact, what you do actually gets magnified. So I think that was a big part of the proposition for us. With the talent pool, right? People who had typically been in the tech industry, been doing tech for tech companies, now had the opportunity to bring in those industry best practices to apply it to healthcare, which is in dire need of those skill sets and that kind of transformation. So I think that was a big draw for us, in addition to, of course, focus on caregivers and career development and learning and development and things like that.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Thank you. I think another question that came in from, and this is to you, Avinash, fairly specifically, is trying to double click on your value versus cost mindset, and the financial shared services example, I think, was useful. Could you share a couple more anecdotes, just in terms of how do you sort of build that mindset, I think, and maybe define the value journey, given you started also fairly young in the ecosystem. So.
Sure. Thanks for the question. So to be honest with you, many a times or most of the times, the conversation still begins with cost. So I think what we still have to start with say, don't get me wrong, cost is important. So I'm not saying what you are talking about, cost is not important. Cost is important. But then how you are looking at cost essentially isn't all about the cost, or is it about the outcome? I think if the focus is on the outcome, that's by default what you're talking about from a value perspective. I think that those have been the conversations that we have had. And just like the finance shared services example I'm talking about, take legal services, right? Some of those that we do from India. Now, that has been a significant, win, wherein let's not talk about the cost, let's talk about the outcome. What is the value you're getting? Obviously, when you talk about some of these complex knowledge-based kind of services, it's not just, okay, you're processing some transaction or building code for certain component. None of it is easy. I won't say it's easy, but when it gets more complex, when your business knowledge, understanding the business is so very important, functional knowledge is so very important, I'm sure there are apprehensions. And that is when you say, okay, first, I'll start small. I'll repeat that. I'll start small. And here's how you measure me. Now, cost, I'll still present a cost metrics, but I'll still have this value metric. Now, depending on what function or service you're talking about, the value measurement could be slightly different, which may be a little difficult as compared to just a plain cost metric. But once you work together and define that, and I think the key word here is working together. So the question to your key stakeholder would be, hey, in an ideal world, what would you expect this team to deliver? If there are no other constraints, what would you like this team to deliver, and draw from there as a metric? Because what I personally have done in the past and have not been successful in is, hey, I have done 4 GCCs in the past, and this is the metric. Does it make sense? Yeah, I mean, I can brag about that, but instead of doing this, involving that key stakeholder, that executive, say what is the ideal outcome that you expect from this particular function. And then invariably there would be a lot of similarities between what you have done in the past, as a person from GCC background, versus what the executive is expecting. So jointly deliver that, jointly build that metric. I think that probably is much easier when it comes to getting a buy-in. Instead of we just trying to push and preach, instead of we are saying preaching, we say we build it together. That's probably the key word for me here. Build the metric together. When the buy-in becomes much easier.
Yeah, I think if I was to paraphrase, it's just be very outcome focused, right, and
Yes.
very measurable sort of wins. That clearly shows global leaders as to how much you've really been able to move the needle. So whatever it sort of takes to do that, I think is really what you're alluding to. There's a couple of questions. I think the one from Supriya I will take towards the end, but there's one that, I think from Niklesh. Simran, if maybe you could comment on this, on innovation, what have been the key challenges? Because it also segues into my last, couple of questions. What have been the key challenges on both internal as well as external to leverage innovation as a force multiplier for the entire organization?
Interesting question, and thanks for that. Right, innovation's got a broad definition when it comes to different people, what they really would call innovation on. I think the way we started and the impact we started making was we started bringing in even net new product innovation. So we had been, again, intentional. I'm probably using that word a little too long, but intentional in saying that we would have an incubation center for net new products in India. And that's what our center also was significantly focusing on. So net new product ideas started coming in because we had a culture where we were, after every feature release, doing initiatives like Spotlight, where you would bring in the entire company together, where people would share what they had done. So you would increase the awareness of the portfolio delivery, let other people learn what were the things you did, see if they can leverage and deliver something more. So those sort of initiatives of getting people together to share the knowledge they had, the things they had done and the knowledge they had acquired, helped others gain and see ideas that started coming in. We called that as better together. I think what Avinash has also shared was collaborative development and making sure that the impact was cutting across. So I think that to us was a big way of how we went about the innovation.
Got it. Okay, awesome. That I think that's helpful, and I think that kind of also segues a little bit into my next set of questions. So Simran, I'm going to start with you again. In terms of key challenges, it can't all have been easy, right? I mean, like we'd love to paint the picture that it was seamless and it was easy from the get go, but let's be honest, that's probably not the reality of it. What were some of the biggest challenges that you had to encounter? Because we know that there's global buy-in. There is the availability and competition for talent, which is so unique to India. Every time we speak to even global leaders, there is, yeah. Just I think, what were some of those areas that were particularly a struggle, and how did you mitigate them?
It's a journey. It was not right on day one, right? And the first most important was to identify what the challenges, right? Like what were the opportunities which we had in front of us, which we had to figure out and improve on. We started with more bigger committees. We started with uh, more of offsites to sort of figure out what were the next steps that we had to do. That was the first phase of how we started working out the initiatives and challenges into the journey. Then we were slightly more strategic, and we identified four broad areas. We identified, as I said in my previous answer, that brand was an area that was one big thing for us, competing with very big global players presence here, much more stronger cloud providers. That was a big presence. So our focus was ensuring we would do some sort of certifications to make sure that the brand awareness increased. We continued to emphasize on the hiring experience for the talent. The hiring experience is sort of the first place where you really make an impact, right? And we thought that would be a good motivator or an influencer to the brand value proposition. Social responsibilities and increasing presence with respect to educational institutes, with respect to the partner systems. Those were sort of the paramounts around brand is where we focused on. Next was, you continued to do the innovations. We were delivering a set of innovations. How do we make a further impact? With the breadth, we said co-located Scrum teams where you would have PM, QE, design, architect, entire breadth of what's needed to really deliver, be present here. But from there, we want to go to what we call as the self-empowered Scrum teams, where they have the decision-making powers, and that really starts, multiplying the value proposition. For that, you have to have the talent growth on leadership, whether it is engineering, whether it is on people side, and that was our third focus. And finally, was as we were growing into the partner ecosystem, or we were delivering value propositions, how could we really make impact or measure the impact to sales? And that was sort of our last driver. So a 4-point strategy for the site. We call it BIGS, BIGS, and that's sort of how we went about.
Okay, very interesting. I think while the metrics that you called out are slightly different, I think all of you have said impact to business and customer centricity being one of the key sort of change makers, right, for the transformation. So okay, so that's definitely one of, I think, the top takeaways along with everything else. But Avinash, do you want to talk a little bit about key challenges that you encountered? Because I know you've talked about what worked well and you like enlisting sponsorship, metrics, etc. But where were there also struggles, and what were they, and how did you sort of manage them?
Oh, there have been like uh, challenges even today. I mean, I can talk about all the great things, but we continue to have our own challenges. So obviously, I think for us, I mean, the first and foremost challenge for us has been lack of any business knowledge. Okay, I mean, whether you develop a custom solution for the business, or it could be any other service. So no matter how smart people you hire, they need to go through that learning curve. Now, do you have a mechanism in place to really impart that? Because it's a niche business, heavily regulated business, environmental compliances, managing hazardous waste. It's a business which needs business knowledge. So I think that has been one challenge, and even to this day, I think that continues to be an area of focus for us. That has been the first one. The second one, I would, in order of priority, I would say managing expectations, because sometimes you are victim of your own success. When you deliver, you deliver something really well, and then you're great. So all of a sudden, the entire perspective changes. So now, oh, there is a problem. Oh, give it to the GCC. They'll make it somehow. They'll make it happen, which is not always going to happen. Yeah, we've done it well, but so I think that managing that expectation is something which has been a challenge for us. The third thing, which I think one of the participants also has asked about, while I talk about the value metric, it's not always easy that for every service that we offer, everything that we can derive a value metric right away. So there is still a good amount of subjectivity in terms of how you perceive as value. I think that has been the other challenge that we have had. This is in addition to general people, kind of issues and all that we all have, but these are kind of few challenges that I would like to kind of specifically highlight in terms of problems that we have faced and we continue to face in certain areas till date.
Yeah. I think as you scale and you continue to grow and look for the next big problem to solve, it's not going to be free of its challenges. Dr. Vedha, and maybe like sort of the same question to you, but in the context of the industry that you operate, the healthcare industry, so highly regulated, customer data and customer centricity is not as easy. In that domain. Anything else that you'd like to add, maybe in the construct of the space that you operate to this?
So just a little more context, right? So with the setup of Providence India, two things happened. One, Providence was going through a new digital transformation journey. And they were for the first time getting used to the concept of having a team outside of the US, right? So this was their first foray internationally. So it was complex in two ways. The sheer nature of the programs that we delivered, of course, jointly with our US teams, that was complex. So we had some 4,000 plus applications when the process started, right? And so remediating that was sort of one of the key things that we needed to do. It was not easy, it's just given the size of the network that we have. Similarly, we kind of had to consolidate. We were on multiple electronic health record systems because we had grown through acquisitions. So each hospital was on their own system, right? So the complexity of the program was right there, right? And both teams on both sides had to deal with that. All 7 or 8 different EHRs were consolidated into a single EHR, which is the largest instance in any health system in the US now, right? So programs like that, I guess, were challenging. But in terms of the teams getting used to working with someone sitting 12 hours away from them, I think there were a couple of challenges there as well. So understanding the model fundamentally, right? Most of the people working in Providence have been there for a couple of decades, right? And so just getting used to the concept of working someone that is not in front of them was different for them. But of course, COVID helped because eventually everybody started working remotely, even in the US. So in fact, it was a crisis, but it actually helped us. What we do to mitigate that is on a continuous basis, the technology leaders, as well as HR and finance, we kind of partner with each other to continuously educate them on why this market is different from that market and what's the value, etc. Right? It helps that, of course, we have buy-in from the top. So that's definitely there. The other challenge that we encountered was, again, knowledge of the healthcare industry. And I think Avinash mentioned that as well, right? So there was a learning curve, but and COVID only complicated things, but we kind of put together a healthcare learning program at different levels of detail. And we also thankfully had cooperation from our stakeholders in the US who were happy to come and share their knowledge on a regular basis with teams here, right? So that actually went a long way in sort of building our readiness to operate in this environment. The technology folks don't necessarily understand what is it that a nurse or a doctor goes through on a day-to-day basis, right? They do not have time to sit and look at your updates. They're busy focusing on their patients, right? So that understanding actually took a little bit of time to build.
As to clarity on who it is that you're actually solving for, it's no,
And
absolutely.
what is their appetite to take up technology or adopt new ways of working, right? So I think that was a big learning for the
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah, must have been fairly complex, right? Because I can't imagine the customer centricity and the ability to understand. It's almost that journey mapping that the technologists have to actually be more empathetic because the nurses and doctors are already doing the more complicated job. So I think that very, very helpful. And thank you so much for that insight. I think there's one sort of specific question, and that brings me to, I think, my last question to all of the panelists is, how do you measure outcomes? And one of the audience members has asked that you look at outcome being measured over multiple years, but are there also leading outcomes that you should be tracking, because your business impact is not going to happen in year one? It takes some time to translate and things like that. But are there leading as well as lagging outcomes that you were able to generate for the GCC and the organization as a result of the transformation? And Dr. Veda, maybe sort of do this first with you, and then have the other leaders also come in. But what were some of those leading and lagging outcomes that you created, leadership, ownership of work, etc., as a result of this transformation initiative for the GCC and the parent org?
Sure. So, see, again, most of this is a twofold transformation. One is the transformation that the system itself is going through, and then the second piece is India, right? So we look at it as the success of the overall transformation program, right? And that's what and we are significant contributors to that. The goal for this group here in India is to accelerate that digital transformation, right? So we essentially just measure our effectiveness by how quickly and how efficiently those programs have been delivered. So in the last couple of years, two large consolidation programs have gotten delivered successfully, right? And at an accelerated pace. So, for example, this EHR delivery, not many health systems have been able to pull that off, while we were able to deliver that in 2 years. Similarly, ERP implementation across all of these various hospitals and clinics, 2-year program again got delivered at an accelerated pace, and it's the largest successful implementation of Oracle in health system, right? So delivery of programs is essentially how we are measuring it ourselves, and we have to mature a lot more in terms of specific metrics that we will look at going forward now that the initial phase of the digital transformation journey is done.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Thank you. That was helpful. Yeah, I think, Simran, same question to you. How do you measure outcome? What outcomes were you able to create as a result of this transformation? And I think one question that's come up is, what is
Branding.
the ultimate North Star for your GCC, right? In the medium to long term. So I think I'll maybe pose that to both of you, ServiceNow as well as Clean Harbors. But start with you, Simran.
Right. The way we looked at outcomes was outcomes of the initiatives and not necessarily the outcomes of our deliverables, because outcomes of our deliverables was a value proposition which was the basic benchmark, right? I mean, there was no compromise that could be done, that had to be continuously increased. It was the set of additional initiatives that we were launching, and the initiatives were to increase the impact and to increase the leadership so that ownership proposition could be brought into the site. So our initiative and our first set of initiatives were just initiatives that not every initiative really had a measurable value, right? And so some really succeeded, some really were, as initiatives over a period of time just fizzled out, which is what was a big learning for us, that some initiatives would really have an outcome, some initiatives would probably have a more intangible outcome. So from the set of initiatives that we were launching, we started measuring what could be the tangible outcomes. Tangible outcomes were in terms of number of patents you were delivering, number of net new innovations you were delivering, number of leadership positions that were created both on tech and people, and as well as on the diversity side. And these were aligning to the company objectives. Then you had the intangible. The intangibles were social responsibilities. Right, we have programs like Rise Up, which is increasing the ServiceNow's awareness, the breadth of ServiceNow, as well as ServiceNow led engineers who could sort of then be playing implementer roles or a consultant role. So we were sort of imparting that knowledge. It's the ServiceNow education knowledge. That it was CSR type of responsibilities of making sure certain villages, certain set of classes, we were making an impact there. So there were the intangible, and then there was internal to us, which was skills of our employees, right? How quickly were we sort of giving them opportunities to grow their skills, learn different skills, deliver certain capabilities through those skills? Because you'd sort of go into education programs and learn the skills, but then unless you really made a delivery out of it, it's a different. So these were sort of things on how we looked upon the journey and the measurables.
Okay, got it. And the last bit about where you see yourself in the long to medium term.
So as I was talking about, from the co-located to the self-empower, that's what our North Stars were.
Okay, awesome. That's a great response. Thank you, Simran. Avinash, final question. I think outcomes or impact that you were able to create as a result of this transformation initiatives that you undertook, and what have we learned from all of that? I'll probably quickly summarize.
Sure. Sure. So I think, and then there's another question, so I'll kind of club both of that is, one, obviously, month one, quarter one of your operation, you can't really demonstrate all the value and the outcome. Okay? So what we looked at is essentially it's kind of a pyramid where you start, and especially for young GCCs, and we are fairly young as a GCC, where you start is, you say, okay, am I reliable? Am I a reliable partner? By which I mean, what I say I'll do, am I doing it? I think that probably is what the foundational parameter that you focus on that. So your metric around those things is what will help you. And from those two things in place, only then you talk about the real outcome of it. Outcome of the initiative or outcome of a particular assignment, project, or an ongoing process. So I think those two foundational things is what you focus on in your initial stages, and then you say, okay, now I have earned the right to talk about, hey, I'm really focusing on the outcome and measure me on the basis of outcome. I think that's probably that is kind of something that has worked for us. So I think that would be my kind of 2 cents to share with everybody here.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And I think we've sort of covered most questions. I don't see any questions that have been left unanswered. At least we've paraphrased it, incorporated it into the larger discussion. But I think I just wanted to take a minute to thank you all. I think in summary, what we've learned essentially is that there's a couple of success factors that possibly cut across all of the industries and organizations that you operate in, right? There's one part of it which is alignment to the global priorities and global goals. You have to ensure that you're not working in a silo, you're not trying too hard to break away too soon. And that really, I think, ties into consistent communication that goes upwards as well as goes downwards in the organization. They're all of the stakeholders that are involved or have skin in the game as far as the transformation is concerned. There is continual focus, I think, on employee centricity as well as customer centricity. So an understanding of the business that in many cases for the India GCCs has to be artificially created. Unfortunately or fortunately, we're in that space, where we are distant from our end consumers and end customers. And as a result, this has to be a sort of artificial or inorganic focus, right? An investment for the GCC. And I think we've talked multiple times about continually tracking the right KPIs that are focused more on value over and above, cost arbitrage and cost savings, which have come up as, some of the key levers of growth. There are specific insights from each of the leaders that we will sort of paraphrase, abstract, and share as a part of the MOM from the session. But thank you so much, Avinash, Simran, and Dr. Vedha for taking the time out. You've obviously seen this journey. You all were winners of, the award fairly recently. For all of those of you who are interested in the award participation and what the process itself looks like, please do get in touch with us. We're particularly proud of this category because it is also one of our oldest, along with Great Place to Innovate. We have also, by virtue of this category, had front row seats to transformation that a lot of GCCs have driven. And for any other queries on either the awards process itself or how we are enabling GCCs to drive greater value from their offshore locations, including India, LATAM, Eastern Europe, please do reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you. If you'd like to have specific conversations with any of the leaders today, let us know. Zinnov can orchestrate that for you. Having said that, thank you so much. The email ID as well as all of our social media handles are up on the landing page right now. But thank you again, and we hopefully will connect soon in some other forum. Thank you and have a great day.